Yes, indeed, the sounds of Evil Horde Hangamageddon. That was, of course, E1M1, taken from the Doom soundtrack. That is, in fact, a remix. And if you want to get hold of that along with the entire Doom soundtrack remixed, then head over to ocremix.org. Is it .org? Yes, I believe it is. ocremix.org, which has various remixes of, well, pretty much everything. Right, you are listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio, and we've got a bit of controversy out of the way, I would hope. Please note that the opinions of myself and the Murloc do not represent the opinions of the management of WoW Radio or any other part of WoW Radio, and all that jazz. Yeah. So unfortunately I have to disclaim things these days. People will simply impute that perhaps you are speaking for everyone, when in fact it's blindingly obvious that all you're doing is expressing your opinion. Now, some people express the opinion that my editing of a reply on our forums, which are of course our jurisdiction, as you may be aware, to the RP PvP issue was infantile and uncalled for. I would argue, no, it was not. What was infantile and uncalled for was flooding the forums with concerns that we are already well aware of, and we have been made aware of. Perhaps you think that we haven't seen the threads on the official forums. You would be incorrect in that assumption. It is in fact only a game, and you should not be stressing or in fact harassing WoW Radio members, which is what some of it is beginning to come to the stage of. Take the joke and move on. Right, okay, back to the matter at hand. We were discussing RP and the potential threats of the RP PvP server. Now, when I first heard about the RP PvP server a number of Blue Pleases ago, what was it? Maybe a month or even 2 months ago, I described it as a really stupid idea. And the reason for that was, of course, that it would attract people who would simply play it as a PvP server, or perhaps would faux roleplay, as I like to call it. I am the mighty Atharius, the ganker of Doom. I shall go forth to slay all the noobs, etc. That is your backstory. You are a psychotic evil ganker of Doom, and then you get 5,000 rogues with the same backstory. And the same character. Not a good thing, really isn't. Now, RP PvP cannot work unless the rules themselves are enforced, because you are putting trust in an overall community that does not deserve it. The RP community is a sub-community of the WoW community, and of course it is well capable of doing what it does best, and that is to roleplay, in what I view as rather restricted ways of doing things. As far as I'm concerned, the game itself is not as suited to role-playing as I would personally like, and that is the reason I did not originally join a roleplay server. The game has become more popular than it should have. Now, you may think that's a silly thing to say. Of course, success is what a commercial enterprise such as WoW Radio should be aiming for. WoW Radio? Not WoW Radio, World of Warcraft itself. Oh dear, only 30 minutes into the show and I'm already blithering! Fantastic. Anyway, back to the point. It is a commercial enterprise, and therefore it was designed to be successful. The problem with success is that you bring in morons. And you can see this all over the forums. It's full of idiots. The game is full of idiots. Every day you log on to World of Warcraft, you have no doubt experienced an idiot in some form or another. Perhaps he is begging for gold, in caps. In the Yell channel, perhaps he's looking for group in the trade channel. Perhaps he is simply an abusive, egotistical, self-centered moron who deserves a slap around the head with a half-brick and a sock. But idiots exist, and that's the reality, I'm afraid. They exist in all web communities. They exist in all walks of life. They are idiots. So is there anything you personally can do to prevent these idiots spreading, breeding? They're insidious and evil. No, effectively there is not, because you do not have the control. And if you do not have the control, you can't do anything about it. The people with the control are unfortunately not doing enough about it, in my opinion. When you take a game like this, you have to assume that everyone who plays it is the worst, most abusive, cheating, hacking bastard that you will ever meet in your life. You should be assuming this with every single person. Never assume that a person is a good person, because in general they are not. So it is, in fact, a guilty until proven innocent policy. It's unfortunate. I remember years and years ago I used to be an optimist when it came to web communities, and I used to assume that everyone was innocent until proven guilty. I learned, unfortunately, in the online gaming community that that is not the case. And while there are a lot of extremely sensible, likeable players, they are drowned out by the voices of what is arguably the vocal minority, but some people even believe is the vocal majority. These are the idiots, the morons. And they are in your community right now. So if there are idiots and morons, and you cannot do anything about it, then how did this situation arise in the first place? And what are you supposed to do? Well, the reason this situation has arisen is because you have a system that is not hard-coded. Now, even hard-coded systems, people will attempt to bypass from time to time. But non-hard-coded systems are far more at risk of this very practice. I think the biggest example I can think of in World of Warcraft is in fact the RP rule set. Not enforced, not hard-coded, difficult to regulate. Therefore, people will inevitably say, no! I will rage against the machine. I'm 13 years old. I listen to Linkin Park. I am going to disobey my parents and everyone else. Haha! You can't do anything. It's the internet! I can do anything I like. I can make an arse out of myself and annoy people. No. It is not acceptable. But unfortunately, the only people that can do anything about that are Blizzard. You can condemn a person all I like, but unfortunately some people are there specifically for that condemnation. They feed off it. By condemning them, they believe that you are irritated by them, that they have gotten to you. Fortunately, of course, simply ignoring them doesn't help matters either. They may be attention whores, but then again they may not. They may be slightly smarter than the average bear. They may be aware that the idea of simply ignoring someone until they go away does not work. And that they are getting to you. And they obviously are, because there are so many threads and so many professions of people saying, I am not happy with the way this community is going. And there's nothing I can do about it. And that makes me feel powerless and irritated. And I would have to agree with that particular viewpoint. Who is responsible? Of course the idiots are responsible. They're responsible for their own actions. You can't blame anyone specifically except them for their own actions. But who are responsible for not necessarily enforcing the rules as harshly as they should? That is, of course, Blizzard. And now I like Blizzard. I like the games they've produced, and I love World of Warcraft. That is the reason I'm sitting here right now, when I could be doing something else, rather than broadcasting to all you lovely people about this game that I do love. So, Blizzard are responsible for not enforcing the rule set correctly. But it goes deeper than that. It does indeed go deeper than that. I recall back in my youth, I used to be... That isn't accurate. I still am a self-professed and proud geek. I shall be, hopefully until the end of my days. It's fun. And it's great that people are disturbed by this. That people perhaps think that activities such as role-playing, playing board games, battle games, video gaming, owning geeky things, watching Star Trek, all that kind of thing, owning a lightsaber, are things which shouldn't be done. They're not acceptable in normal society, and they should be hidden. They are taboos. They should be underground, repressed activities. And it disturbs them that someone is willing to profess them openly. This is a very conservative society. Even though some people may say otherwise, they are scared of new things. They fear what they do not understand. Geek culture is one of those things. They see it as an infringing threat on their normal, everyday, quote-unquote, lives. And back in the midst of time, I did used to RP quite often. But not with video games. I initially started to RP with pen and paper. Dungeons and Dragons. the classic, the undefeatable. Get out your D20s now, folks. It was brilliant, I loved it. As I got older, I changed the way I played my character, but I would always have a backstory. I would always flesh out my character and attempt to act within it. I've always thought that one of my particular strengths is the ability to be creative, and hopefully that makes up for my so many flaws. And that's why I was quite good at role-playing. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely. As I got older, I changed my persona from a sneaky, untrustful rogue to a flamboyant, drunken, and lovable dwarf. And to assist my RPing, I would actually get drunk in the process, and it was great. We would play Dungeons & Dragons in the pub. Fantastic. Later on, I joined a game called Moom, Multi-Users in Middle-earth, one of the original multiplayer role-playing video games. It was, of course, a Telnet MUD, multi-user dungeon. While RPing was not enforced, it was encouraged. And people did so. And rightly so. Based in Tolkien's world, it was an amazing game. Very well written, but exceedingly difficult. Required a lot of time and dedication. And I think it would be a disrespect to Tolkien to, in fact, act in any other way as is congruent to his particular way of storytelling. The idea is that you are part of the story and not simply some nonsensical entity outside it, playing for fat loots. Now, in that game, there was a lot of facility for that. No one specifically had the aim of getting fat loots, because in general, fat loots did not really exist. Fat loots were usually random drops or created by various things. The goals in the game were not particularly specific. You made your own story. If I wished to make war on the orcs, then I would do so. If I wished to slay Uruk-hai, I would do so. If I wished to go outside Fornost or Bree or any other number of towns and slay the surrounding bandits for the good of the land, I would do so. That is RPing, in essence. Doing something not for the reward, but for the sake of it. The enjoyment you gain from RPing and role-playing itself is, of course, the idea of a continuing story, a story which you yourselves are part of, and it is immersion. Immersion which I think has been forsaken in recent video gaming titles, especially role-playing games. They're called role-playing games, but they're not role-playing games. How much role-playing went on in Diablo 2? And how much of the community, in contrast, were power gamers? How many hackers were there in Diablo 2? And was it the game itself that encouraged such an attitude? It's certainly possible that both Diablo 2 and World of Warcraft have encouraged an attitude which is not the way it should be as far as role-playing goes. The game systems itself, for instance, the way that mobs are spread out in grindable groups, and the way that quests are not necessarily linked, and of course the way that things respawn. Obviously that is a mechanic of MMORPGs, but perhaps it is a weakness in the way that how can you justify and feel satisfaction from slaying Baron Rivendare for the cause of the Argent Dawn and the good of the land and for the memory of those killed in the Stratham Massacre, when he'll just be back the next time you go into the instance? I think perhaps it is the game itself which is counterproductive when it comes to RPing, and I'm aware that RPers do have a job on their hands to maintain an immersive RP environment against the background of a game which in fact encourages in places power leveling and competitive play. Now I think this is going to be very prevalent on the RP PvP servers, and that is in ways unfortunate. It is unfortunate that the way the original RP servers were designed did not allow Warcraft itself to happen. And now, as the competitive element has built substantially, and we are not used to this idea of RP PvP, I fear that RP PvP may suffer greatly at the hands of malcontents and miscreants within this community. I would say to the RPers and all those who are going to be involved, including myself and the WoW Radio Guild, that this is something that should not be allowed to happen. Against the background of a game which does not necessarily encourage role-playing and systems which do not pander to role-playing attitudes, we need to stand fast and play the game and role-play in the classic style. Off my soapbox, rant over. Okay, after the break, you will be hearing from the likes of Working As Intended, Ask the Murloc, Rap in the Forums, and back to our usual content on this show, dealing with various issues from the European community, hot topics, idiots, morons, and the like. You're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio. Would you like some folk metal? I'm sure you would. This is Finn Troll. It's Ellie Trez.